The Substance is from writer and director Coralie Farge, the mind behind 2017's Revenge. It stars Demi Moore as an aging celebrity who's been chewed up and spit out by Hollywood, until she takes a serum that creates a younger, hotter clone of herself played by Margaret Qualley, who takes her place every second week. And the younger version becomes an instant phenomenon under the name Sue. Yeah, no last name. Probably as a statement on how Hollywood doesn't really care about women as actual people. More on that later. But the balance between the two becomes a little too much, and the two bodies start to feud, and it all culminates in a finale of blood and body horror. Yes, this is a straight-up Cronenberg-style body horror movie full of gratuitous violence and nudity. And Farge turned it into something that won the Best Screenplay Award at Cannes. Between this and Titan winning the Palme d'Or, it looks like female directors from France are the ones who are bringing this subgenre into competition with high art, at least at Cannes. And between the two of them, I'd say I prefer The Substance, in my opinion. Behind all the gore and grossness of the final act, this is actually an allegory for how Hollywood and society in general treats women and the desire for one woman to be young and relevant again. Really, the main reason Demi Moore's character isn't famous anymore is because she's not as young and hot anymore, and the only reason Qualley's character is more famous is... you get the point already. Moore's status is perfectly set up at the beginning with a time-lapse shot of her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame as it turns from a hotspot to just an old beat-up monument to a has-been. An opening which is kind of low-key genius, and after all that we get a non-stop assault on the patriarchy. It takes place in a sort of heightened version of Hollywood which is not realistic, but it gets the point across. This has all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, but really who cares when it's this entertaining. And it's shot very well too, every shot looks absolutely beautiful. And then we finally get to the ending, and yes, it is definitely something, not just in terms of its gore and Cronenbergisms, but just for how weird it gets. There were several moments over this relatively short amount of time when I asked myself what the hell was I watching? In a good way, in the sense that this is the most entertaining part of the movie, and probably the most entertaining theater experience of the year, at least, especially if seen with a crowd. I didn't get a big crowd when I saw it, but it was big enough to really get the experience. Because for something where the trailer says that it's a scream of rage in cinematic form, it's still really funny, especially in the end for just how weird and over the top it is. There is gore here that feels like something right out of an Evil Dead movie. The story is unpredictable, and every time I thought this is probably the end, it still found another ridiculous direction to go in. It's almost 2.5 hours long and not a second is wasted. And the acting is really good as well. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley do not hold back just because of the genre. And it also features Dennis Quaid as a sleazy Hollywood exec, and he plays that very well, which is also helped sometimes by the way that he's shot. There's one scene near the beginning of him eating shrimp where the camera's so close and uncomfortable that this simple act feels even grosser than the gore. Also, ironic how he went from his Reagan biopic just a couple months ago to a movie that would put every 80s Republican into a coma. But it's not all good news. There's still some confusion over the rules of who's in charge of which body. At first I thought it was an instance where they're all one consciousness in both bodies, but then as things heat up they both seem to be spiteful towards each other and talking about the other as if she was a different person. Is Demi Moore not in control of Sue? And if she is, then why does she seem hell-bent on getting back at herself? It's this kind of confusion about what the rules are that keep this from being a 5-star movie. And I don't give out a lot of 5 stars. But despite that, this is a 2.5-hour body horror epic with top-notch acting and a timely and important message that will easily rank among my favorites of the year. Megalopolis is from legendary writer and director Francis Ford Coppola, a passion project that he's been trying to get off the ground for decades before selling part of his winery to finance its over $100 million budget himself. And so with that he made an ambitious, epic, decades in the making, free from the creative restraints of the studio system. And it sucks. Yep, after all that it's just a pretentious mess. Sad to say that. But I'm far from the first to say that. Basically everything fell apart for this movie like the second it was screened. It was very divisive among the festival crowd and it probably got distribution just because Coppola said he'd pay for the marketing as well. Then there was the infamous Band trailer, which included quotes from past critics trashing Coppola's most acclaimed films, to prove that he's just too smart for everybody. The only problem is that most of the quotes were completely made up. I joked about this on my social media, and when I posted that to the YouTube community post, I got some guy who didn't quite get the memo that they were fake and didn't get the joke I was making and agreed that even the most famous critics are completely irrelevant, not knowing that he was speaking to maybe not a critic but somebody who criticizes for a hobby, for now. Ironically, there's probably a big chance he hated this movie too. Because, unlike all those other movies, the word that best describes this one is pretentious. It seems to be in a constant struggle to seem smart. It shoves in so much pondering about philosophy or whatever, but it's just handled so smugly. Nobody in this movie talks like a human being. They all talk like they're writing a scholarly paper. Possibly the first lines out of Adam Driver's mouth is him delivering the to be or not to be monologue from Hamlet in its entirety for no real reason. And it's all handled with even less subtlety than the substance, except that lack of subtlety actually worked for the substance. It fit in with what it tried to be, a satirical body horror with a dark, over-the-top sense of humor. Meanwhile, Megalopolis is a self-serious art house drama, and it just comes across as trying too hard. Like, there's this one scene where the heroes are in a car driving down a crime-ridden street, and some of them start talking about how lawless everything is, and then they pass some giant statues of law and order type things, and they all start slumping over tired. Wow, I wonder what that's trying to say about Law and Order. The exact thing that they're talking about right now, just to put that idea into your head, because otherwise this would be sort of difficult to understand and you might not know that this movie is smart. But on the positive side, that budget was definitely put to good use. There is some amazing set design and sequences. All the technical aspects look great, and the acting isn't bad either. I don't see any standouts for Oscar nods, but they're all serviceable, which I guess should bring me to the characters they're playing. They're kind of flat, and have really pretentious made-up sounding names. I mean, just look at these. The main character, the totally not stupidly named Caesar Catalina, is a pretty good example of this movie's characterizations in hindsight. His main traits are that he wants to build a new city that could, basically end all of mankind's problems because he's a genius Mary Sue type character. Also, he can stop time. This is never explained, and doesn't really have much impact on the story that I can remember. And did I mention all these girls throwing themselves at him? Oh my god, is this how Neil Breen sees his movies as? But despite all of this, it's not even as much of an interesting train wreck as you may believe. So many people, even those who hated it, were hyping it up as this big, crazy movie, a train wreck that you couldn't look away from. Going into it, I wasn't sure if I was expecting this to be good or bad, but I was expecting it to be interesting at least. Even more so with the reports of the version that played in festivals, which had characters talk to the audience and the theaters hired somebody to talk back. This scene wasn't in the version I saw. I wasn't expecting it to, not even with a disembodied voice or a Mystery Science Theater type silhouette portraying the live actor. But I was expecting the rest of the movie to be on that level of craziness that comes from a director who's gone mad with power. But no, it couldn't even deliver that. Nothing ever reaches that level. It's just a bunch of pretentious talking sequences set against some admittedly gorgeous special effects with a few scattered bizarre scenes, most notably one near the end involving a small crossbow. Not always really that interesting. Actually, scratch that. Now that I'm here talking about it, it is actually on that level. But only in hindsight. And at an overlong 138 minutes, it's going to be a while before you can start to think about it in hindsight. This movie is pure, uncut ambition, even more so in hindsight, from one of the greatest directors ever, which is why it's a bummer that it often comes out kind of dull. I don't want to be too hard on it, considering it was obviously such a personal passion project. It ends on text saying that Coppola dedicates it to his wife, which is there pretty much to make me just feel bad for not liking it. It is visually stunning and shows passion, even if the result comes out to be kind of a self-indulgent mess that isn't even as much of an entertaining mess as you've probably been led to believe.